This is the economic update for the third quarter of 2022. Um, I call this one economic decay. And I've been talking about this. I started this quarterly uh, intervention last quarter, and I'll continue to do these updates because I think they're significant to how executives need to be looking at their organization. If we look at just a couple of key indicators here, gross domestic product, GDP, was down 1.6% in the first quarter, down 0.6% in the second quarter. We're looking at a 0.3% gain. If we look at this week, we may fall negative. That would be my expectation. It just depends on how the last numbers come out. Regardless, it's a very weak economy and has been for a long period of time. We also are starting to see that the consumer is stalling out, with rent and mortgages increasing, food increasing, energy is still high. These are all things that impact any of your customers, because even if you're business to business, somebody has to buy the product eventually, and or get the service that they need. So it's not looking very good, especially with the actions of the Fed this week, raising another 3/4 of a point and saying that they're committing to reducing inflation, which I fully support. I just don't think that they understand what the economic pain is going to be. Um, we have $31 trillion in debt for every percentage they increase the Fed funds rate. That is about 300 billion in additional interest expense. So, you can talk a big game all you want, but at some point, so things are going to start falling apart. And my expectation is that they'll have to pause at a minimum and pivot, uh, not too far in the distant future. Things are starting to break. And, we started to see the liquidity get sucked out of other countries, which will be a subject I want to discuss in this episode. And I guess the only good news right now is that labor is starting to get easier to hire because as things deteriorate. But, you know, things that run the economy, like housing, with the interest rates up, are really the brakes are starting to get hit. And when you start um, increasing federal funds rate at the aggressive pace that the Fed has been doing after their transitory um, comment, where they missed their opportunity to maybe begin to do something. But to be honest with you, since the GFC, the Great Financial Crisis, this thing has been in tailspin for quite a while. So, in my last update, I suggested that people start thinking about layoffs. Um, I did a video actually on the bullwhip effect that really affects things during this time period where you have the demand's not there, and people are still like big companies, Walmart and you know Meyer, Kroger, over ordering things. Um, you start to see some sales in some things, but this bullwhip effect, everybody increases thinking that things are going to stay the same, and now they're probably the pendulum's going to swing, and they'll start to not order anything. And then the other thing I talked about quite a bit, and you can almost look through a lot of my videos, is innovation, and that organizations need to be proactive in their innovation right now. And they should have been from the last quarter. Hopefully, organizations are paying attention to that, no matter how big or small you are. Entrepreneurial companies naturally do it. When you start to get to 150 or more people and the complexity gets in, Sometimes it's not a proactive thing that happens in organizations. So I'm going to add four things that I believe organizations should be working on right now. One of them is to look at bankruptcies. Now, the US dollar is getting very strong, and what that does, according to the milkshake theory, which seems to be playing out right now, is that it's sucking the liquidity out of all of the other countries that are out there because they can't raise rates. Japan, a quarter of a point would almost kill their economy. So, you're going to start to look at you need to start to look at bankruptcies in your worldwide partners, supply chains, things of that sort. What is the strength of their financials? And if they're not willing to reveal it, you might want to start taking, mitigate some of the problems that might be on the horizon. So you need to look, from, you know, beginning to end for bankruptcies in that supply chain and understand who's involved and what problems that are might be starting to manifest themselves because especially overseas you're going to see this liquidity getting sucked up and if they don't have the funds and they're highly leveraged then what that's going to do is start to lead to bankruptcies uh, in that particular supply chain. So it's at the top of my list of things I wanted to add because I'm starting to see some of the pain associated with a strong U.S. dollar. And if this thing gets to, I think Brent Johnson, who kind of developed the milkshake theory, thinks the U.S. dollar get to 150, wheels are coming off. And I think long before then, there will have to be some adjustment by the Fed in there. The second thing is, uh, you know, you, we talked about layoffs a little bit, but I'm going to actually talk very specifically about making sure you know how to identify the people who are value creating in your organization. So if you're a software company, you don't want to be firing software developers. Yeah, you want to get rid of some of the administrative, the DEI stuff, the ESG stuff. Those things, unless you can show that it's actually creating value, and there's supposedly studies that ESG is creating value for companies that they're being more successful, but it's kind of the same as climate change as far as the data goes, and that is that um, there are people that are doing these reports saying how great ESG is, just like climate change, that have skin in the game, that they need funds and they need money in order to continue down that path. And if you read Woke Inc. by Vivek Ramaswamy, who's kind of leading the charge on against DEI and ESG and the problems associated with it, you'll find that they've made the numbers more favorable about how well they do. And actually, what Vivek found is they're probably doing 20% worse than the S&P. But I think we'll start to see more data out on things like that because just adding more people talking about ESG and DEI and all of that is they're not value creating roles, and so those should be the first to go. The third thing, pursue quality. Vivek references excellence, but it's really we're talking about the same thing. You need to uh, start down the path of making sure that your operations are um, creating quality. You don't have to rework things. You don't have to, there's a whole series of things that you can do in order to eliminate waste in your organization. Most of the system I put together, as far as the 95 method, is all about that. How do we streamline the organization? How do we get the right analytics? How do we not do ancillary things that don't create value in the organization. Then the fourth thing is you're going to have to start looking out for, especially for those that live in or have organizations in urban areas, crime and theft. Now, I know it's been going on for quite a while, but as the economy deteriorates, you're going to start to see an increase in crime and theft, not only from within the organization, but from without. And, you know, you've seen maybe heard some of the stories in New York City about, people getting mugged, going to work on the subways, and just it, right now we're living in a time where we're set up for things to get a lot worse as far as crime and theft. And so my suggestion is that, especially the deeper we get into this, people will become more desperate, and you will need to make adjustments. So that's what I wanted to cover in this economic update. It's just kind of a brief thing, but remember, there is always a better way.